this, sometimes this burden around your neck, which is your home, actually has lived a long life, which we find fascinating and worthy of saving, of course. So Bungalow, here's an example. By the way, just so if you haven't figured it out, this is, each one of these shades is meant to be a decade, this being the turn of the century there. So Bungalow, 1905 here, really it was a relatively short period of bungalows, but they were an enormously prevalent building type, thanks in large part to Montgomery Ward and Sears Roebuck, who a lot of these were the catalog houses that were spread all throughout the United States. It was a cheap and quick way for people to get homes built. But in that period of time, the First World War, of course, broke out and was completed. Prohibition was in place. Lake Worth incorporated in 1913. The city was surveyed with 55 miles of streets. It was the Jazz Age, and Great Gatsby was published around the time that this house was built, in the early 20s. So the idea is to peg each one of these primary styles with a snapshot in time. I love this one. Mediterranean Revival, it was the Great Depression, the Lake Worth Casino opened in 1922, the New Deal was launched by President Roosevelt, Shirley Temple released the good ship Lollipop, Lake Worth outlaws gambling at the casino. Who would have thunk it? And then in 47, it was significantly damaged, the casino was, by a hurricane. I guess that was retribution, I don't know. But Art Deco, this one I love. You know, Art Deco was a remarkably short period of time. 1925 to 1943. Nearly 200 Art Deco hotels were built in Miami Beach in those 25 years. Gasoline was 10 cents a gallon. Somewhere of the Rainbow was released. And I love this. The Lake Worth Historic Public Library, the one you have over here on Lucerne, opened in August of 1941. 4 or 5 months later was Pearl Harbor. So the grand opening of your public library was overshadowed a number of months later by the beginning of World War II. So to put these buildings that you experience and drive past and walk past every day in some sort of historical context, we think is important. We're trying to do that in addition to all the drawings and all that stuff. So as I said, there's 9 or 10 different primary styles. One of the things we're doing is building a 3-dimensional drawing or model of each one, where we identify and define all of the different character-defining elements. And we're doing that for each one of the styles. Bungalow, Mission. You have a great collection of Mission-style architecture. You know, Mission is characterized, if you don't know, by the parapet roof. It typically has a flat roof that you can't see. And oftentimes, you know, it's a very simple volume, but it will also have smaller volumes attached to it. The window types are also very, very unique, and also the parapet typically undulates, and you'll usually have some sort of interesting ornamentation on the chimney if you have one of those. So these are the things we're dialing into. Mediterranean Revival, I think most of us know what that is. Art Deco, I personally love the comparison of this to what is streamlined modern. When you squint your eyes, they look pretty much the same. But Art Deco is actually much more fanciful. And when you look at the history of what was happening with Art Deco versus Streamlined Modern was coming out of Europe. It was sort of the machine age. And so it tends to look more nautical. And it's more stripped down of its ornament. So these are 2 different styles, but they're really from the same gene pool, if you will. Minimal traditional wood, masonry. You have a predominant or a great amount of minimal traditional masonry buildings. These are very simple but very elegant masonry buildings. They're often defined by, you know, those metal sort of lattice, not columns, but the sort of front supports on the porch. Oftentimes the original windows are steel casement windows that you roll and they open out, which are just absolutely beautiful. Oftentimes you'll notice that they have little vents down at the bottom oftentimes, because even though they're masonry, they have wood floors and they have crawl spaces or air spaces underneath. That was intended to keep them cooler. The band of development in Lake Worth, their history, captures a lot of these buildings in the neighborhoods. Mid-century modern, you've got a great collection of mid-century modern architecture in the city. You know, these are often very low slung roofs that are asymmetrical. They're doing things with glass and with structure that you couldn't do, 40 years earlier. Very modern, though. You look at that and you think of, the space age and what was happening in the 50s and 40s, and then the 60s. And then the ranch style. Believe it or not, the ranch style actually is a high style in the sense that it was designed to be exactly as it is, with very, it was responding to the growing families post-war. Larger lots. You'll notice that these are typically on larger lots. They're not as infill compatible as other types. They have long sweeping facades, and then of course, this is the one style that you'll notice that has an enclosed garage. Now, I gotta tell you, I grew up with this, and I'm thinking, okay, that's historic. That means I'm historic. Who wants to think that? But when you actually look at some of the subtle detailing of it, there is a great deal of appreciation, particularly that your staff has, in keeping the memory of these buildings. So I'm going to quickly go through. Each one of these styles is going to have its own chapter. Okay, and I'm going to go through the bungalow chapter just to give you a sense of how it's going to lay out. So, bungalow. We all know what a bungalow is. An introduction, a narrative as to what the bungalow is. What is the type of architecture? Bless you. Where did it originate? What are some of its defining features? Why do people love it? How did it end up in South Florida? This is what I talked about earlier. A little history about, the catalog houses. Some of you may have heard that. That you could order house plans through the catalog, not online, of course. And then define or describe the style. What are the elements in a narrative? What are the elements that make it what it is? Why is this house a bungalow and not Art Deco? It's got this type of roof. It has deep overhangs. It has columns and piers. It has different types of windows. Art Deco often is horizontally proportioned versus the windows being vertically proportioned. These subtle details are what makes this what it is. So again, we go through some of the historic components of it. The model that I showed you earlier that describes the type of roof, the roof pitch, the typical materials, attic vents, overhangs. All of these pieces, think of it, I hate to put it this way, but think of it as Mr. Potato Head. All of the pieces that make Mr. Potato Head versus Mrs. Potato Head, is what defines the character of that architectural style. And then we have a gallery of examples. All of these are in Lake Worth. I was really impressed because where I live, bungalow is a very predominant style in West Palm Beach because a lot of it was built in the 20s, early 20s, at least in my neighborhood. But you have a very rich collection of bungalow-style architecture within your districts. And this doesn't even account for all of them. But there's a lot of rich examples here within the city. And then in this chapter, we talk about, well, what are the types of windows that would be original to a bungalow? You've got single hung, double hung. This is 1/1, one pane over one pane. Typically, you'll see a lot of 3/1s, 3 panes over one pane, 4/1s, which are more rare. And that's something you really want to try to hold on to and restore if you can, because that's a real defining feature. You'll never see a 4/1 window in a deco or a ranch or virtually any other style. So, what is this kit of parts that are typical and unique to the style of the bungalow? We want to show it, as I said, we try to represent it, we're going to try to represent the information typically in 3 ways. In a narrative form, because some people prefer to read, in a drawn form, and then in a photograph too, so that you can see what a real example of that looks like. Same thing for doors. As I said, we're still under construction here, obviously, so we're not hunting, and this is strict to business, by the way. If you've seen us photographing in front of your house, that's what we've been up to. So, you got to be kind of stealth when you're taking pictures of people's front doors. But we do want to catalog all these, and we will, so that you have a reference of what are all the different options, that are true to the style of your house. So then there's the dreaded Secretary of Interior standards. These are the federal, this is the FBI of historic preservation, right? And they're telling you what you can and cannot do to your house. Well, actually, the standards are really pretty flexible. They're specific. And what we're going to do is go through those standards, and rather than just dump them in there in text, but actually show examples of what each one of those means. Because sometimes there's room for interpretation there. We want to make sure that those standards are coming across in a clear way. But some of the things that they reference, what are the different exterior surface types? Stucco, smooth stucco, rough stucco, lightly textured stucco. Some of it's very rough stucco, like you'll see here. And some of it's not really recommended. And some of this new construction where, what would normally be masonry detailing is just kind of a little sketched in line, and you can tell it's fake. So, when you can avoid that sort of treatment, it's recommended that you do. Better do no fake detailing at all than fake detailing. Brick. You've got some houses that have exposed brick. You have some houses that have painted brick. Rusticated brick. This is a very interesting treatment that you'll see in some of the buildings. I think you've got some commercial buildings that have that. Even stucco siding and stucco treatments are being applied in some of the historic districts for new construction. So we want to go through it and illustrate all the different variants, variables of different exterior surfaces. You've got some beautiful houses that have wooden shakes or shingles. There's also, a whole catalog of different siding types. You've got the original wide asbestos siding, and then you've got, the ubiquitous from the 70s vinyl and, metal siding, which probably wouldn't be recommended, especially on existing structures. So this section of the document is going to be sort of the user manual, helping you as an owner and an applicant as to what's appropriate and what is not. And the way we organize this is going to be very important. And by the way, that in and of itself is its own design problem that we're still developing. But just as an example, let's say you've got this sheet, and these are windows obviously. So we've done all these drawings of every imaginable type of window. Let's say your original window, believe it or not, was a jalousie window in your house, which could have been true, depending upon when your house was built. But you want to replace those windows because jalousies, they have their issues. So what might be a more successful replacement versus what might be not as successful a replacement? Let's say you have an Art Deco house that had original jalousie windows and you want to replace those. Well, better you use something that more replicated the original jalousies, not in that it's all little panes, but maybe it's just one casement opening. You certainly don't want to go to a 4/1, which is clearly a bungalow type of window, because now you're mixing metaphors, right? And it's diluting the actual style, the language itself. So this is something that we're developing, and this is going to be, I think, an important piece of this section. But like I said, this document is still very much under production. And so, this evening's presentation was to give you sort of a sampling of the direction that we're headed in. The goal is to provide options for you, clarity in terms of options for improving, adding on to, fixing, restoring, rehabilitating your historic structures, and what the range of those options are. Because you can come in and ask the city for anything. You can pay your permit fee, and you can go before the board and say, I want to rip out all these windows and I want to replace them with something that's completely inappropriate. Well, at least you've got a document that's telling you beforehand, these are inappropriate. And you're going to have to go to the board for that. But there may be some windows that more closely approximate what the originals were, that we might even be able to approve you administratively. So the choice is yours. But really that's what this is. As I said a few times now, it's a tool meant to communicate to you what the expectations and options are. We also want to go through and really develop detailed historic district maps, because you don't have those right now. In fact, your GIS department is doing the best they can, but really something that can be user-friendly, that folks can take around with them. Kathleen mentioned earlier, some historic district, I live in a historic district, I'm really fortunate in West Palm, it's called Grandview Heights, and we've had historic tours every year for almost 2 decades. And it's a great way for us to make money for the neighborhood. And that money goes into curb and gutter and street trees and lights and all that kind of stuff. But having those maps so that people can walk around and understand, you know, what we like to do is develop beautiful maps that show where the different styles are located in the different districts. So that they can be almost a field guide for visitors and for residents too. So, next steps. We are on a fast track with this. One of the things I failed to mention is that this effort is being funded, at least 50% is funded by a state grant that the city was able to secure last year. And that state grant runs out at the end of June, I believe. So, July, we got an extension, we got a month extension. So, where we are now is meeting with you all. We intend to submit the first full draft next month. That doesn't mean it's going to be complete, but it will be the first time that we can hand staff what is a relatively complete, if not fully complete, though not vetted, draft of the document. And then we intend to, once we get some comments back from staff and make, you know, the expected revisions and adjustments, have another presentation like this, whether it's at the Historic Preservation Board or it's another open forum like this. I don't think it's been determined, but to present the, you know, what the actual recommendations are, what the book is. Keep in mind, this is going to have to, excuse me, this document is going to have to go before the Historic Preservation Board, and ultimately it's going to have to be, you know, if it's going to be implemented, it's going to have to be adopted by the City Commission. So, that's the presentation this evening. Hopefully I teed up some thoughts that we can just have a conversation. Any questions, we'll try to answer them. Thank you for your time.
So, I just wanted to point out, if you didn't know, Commissioner Herman Robinson is here tonight. Commissioner Scott Maxwell was here earlier, and unfortunately he had to step out. And if you could, the members of the Historic Preservation Resource Board, if you could stand up, please. I want to recognize them. These are your neighbors that when you go before the board, they're here. So what I'd like to do now is, you've heard us talk for a long time, I'd like to hear from you. We don't want to give a lot of feedback to your comments, we're going to listen to your comments, and we're going to take good notes on what you have to say. I'm going to try to repeat your question the best I can. If my voice actually dies on me, then Dana can jump in and take over. So, yes.
Hello, I live in Royal Point, Sienna. I'm in a 1923 house. I bought it because of the foliage was 20 years old, so I do respect what you're doing. However, how does that wash in my neighborhood when we have that? And I know there are apartments that came in around the 40s, 50s that the finish built. So there is this growth, but now the CRA puts in 2-story houses, brand new. How does that wash with the old?
Without knowing the exact location, we'd have to see if all those were actually within the historic district or outside.
I'm listed in the historic. That's why I came.
And all the ones next to you are too?
No,
I don't think they are.
House next door.
I think those might be outside the district, so that's where you have to actually look at the map and figure out which properties are in the district and which are out. Because the district boundaries are kind of sawtooth at times. And so if you want to look at it, sometimes they're just across the street or down one block might be outside of the historic district.
Mark, are you west of
Yes,
Dixie?
I am.
Okay, I don't think that's a historic district. So this is your opportunity to create a historic district where you live.
All right, come on, I know you guys have that shot. Let's go. What do you got? Yes?
I just want to say thank you for coming out with the guidebook that we can all use, because it's been so difficult over the previous years in doing anything to update our house, improve our homes, such as windows. That's the biggest issue we have in the city. When we purchased our house, we had jealousy windows, we had awning windows, it was a mismatch. So we modified and went through the process of getting windows. It was coming about with the historic district in our neighborhood. The person that was working at that because we were replacing awning windows and jealousy windows. One is to put in colonials. I'm a ranch house. Colonials don't work in a ranch house. We're going for mishmash windows as it is. By putting what you had as accepted windows going back and forth, the iconics, that worked. Well, we had to put the sticky white things on, making them colonials until it passed the review, and then you could peel them off at $200 a window. Luckily, our city commission worked with us, and they gave us a variance for that. But I'm glad to see that there's actually going to be a booklet that we can have to use as a guideline for things that we want to do in our home, in our area, to keep it the way we want it. So thank you.
Well, thank you very much. And you know, if anything, you know, just to cut to the chase, nobody, not the city, not us, nobody wants you to spend good money after bad, as they say. Or, you know, we've all heard the horror stories. You know, I got a contractor, he got a great deal on these windows, went out and bought a garage full of windows, and now I can't use them, you know, because they are really, really inappropriate, you know. So that's really what this is about. It's not added regulation, it's meant to be to clarify, as I said, with the expectations and options. So thank you for your tool. It's a tool, yes. Yes, sir.
Back in the 1990s, College Park rated the first historic district, and I believe we used treasure codes to help us with our guidelines. I don't know if you're aware of that. And possibly the neighborhood association should still have the original paperwork that was used to help create the guidelines. So trying not to reinvent the wheel and save a couple of nickels. And then just one other thing, the building department really needs to have some paperwork there for residents who come in or looking to do work. A lot of people will nickel and dime their improvements, but if they know they can get a exemption, they might be willing to take a loan out and do it all in one fell swoop, rather than nickel and dime here and there.
Well, you know, the city has done a great job, and you know, I think William and his staff get a lot of credit for this. You know, when you go into the city, there's all those different pamphlets about what is historic preservation, what is this, and the idea is that we're going to create some of those for this effort too, so that you've got an easy walking guide with you that'll give you some ins and outs, help you steer the way. You know, one of the things, and I didn't put this in the presentation, and I'm going to go out on a limb and bring it up. We're doing the design guidelines. That's going to be a book, a document that everybody gets to use. But in addition to that, there's probably going to be some recommendations that we're going to make to the city. That it's not appropriate to put in the design guidelines, but they're ideas that have come up, you know, throughout this process. Like for instance, wouldn't it be great if there was some additional program that, you know, if you decided to, the number one goal is that if you've got original windows and you've got original details, I mean, it's everyone's goal in historic preservation is to try to restore that. You know, that's not always possible. Sometimes it's cost prohibitive, you know, depending upon what it is you're trying to rehabilitate. But if there are certain incentives, you know, certain assistance for those that are willing to go that extra step, you know, to restore their windows, you know, to remill their wood, whatever it might be, you know, to really have that high bar. You know, we're looking at ways that we can maybe build some program like that in. Again, I can't tell you what it is because we're just still kind of brainstorming about it, but, you know, the idea that it shouldn't be all stick. There needs to be some carrot there, too. And so we're trying to bake that into not only the appreciation and the pride of being part of this family, which is the historic district, but also when push comes to shove and I've got a choice of either restoring these windows for 20 grand or replacing them for 15. If I had a little assistance, it might help me over the end. So that's just something else that's going to be a white paper, I guess, that goes along with this, if you will. Okay, any other questions? Yes, sir.
Good evening, Dan. Thank you for coming out.
Thank you.
Just one quick second, because this is supposed to be a neighborhood association, if any of the neighborhood presidents want to stand up and just make face visible so that people in the city working, don't like it. We find something else, we can put a little note in there under the style note. This is a style-specific name for the coastal city of Lake Worth, or beachfront city of Lake Worth. The technical name for Florida State Historic Officer is Frank Vernacular. Yeah, because vernacular in a sense means plain and ordinary, and while it might really truly apply to the few houses in the city, a lot of us really feel a little more creative and more stylish than that. And minimal traditional is also another one that's a little bit of an oddball. I know we want to be accurate, we can certainly be accurate in notes, quote McAllister if we want, or something like that, or Florida State Guidelines for Historic Preservation, whatever that manual is called. But I really ask that.
Thank you. And thank you for your service on the board, too. It's good to work with. Yes, ma'am.
I've got two things. One, I really want to make sure that we have, and I know we've talked about it, a list of places and locations and maybe comparable pricing of those things that you recommend that we replace our particular types of windows, doors, whatever with. And I'd love to see it more visible on the website and more easily searchable. It's not very easy to find historic guidelines on the website right now. I'm sure it will get more visible soon, and I would like to say sooner rather than later. Additionally, I have a 25-foot lawn in the historic district of, Northeast Lucerne, and I would like to see some sort of chapter, note, footnote about the houses that have the little houses behind them, little cottages, so to speak, with the granny flats. And there are a ton of those in the original plat of Lake Worth. I don't know if they started out that way or were created, but we're sort of not making plans for their continued existence as the plans for the city goes along. And I think there is quite a nice place for them in the city. And they would be very appropriate. We were just talking about micro condos the other day, and frankly, there's a lot of micro residences in Lake Worth that would do well to continue existence.
That's a
Thank
great
you.
idea.
And just a quick plug, if you haven't